This was the moment the world stopped breathing. This was the sentence that erased billions. This was the smile that ended an empire. No warning, no mercy, no second take a hand, refused on camera, and history rewrote itself in real time. The woman who laughed did not know she had just signed her own collapse. The woman who stayed silent did not raise her voice, did not defend herself, did not blink, and within one night the market would kneel before her decision. The glass-walled boardroom hovered. Above the city, like a throne carved from money and arrogance, sunlight poured through flawless windows, reflecting off polished steel and marble. A room designed to intimidate, to remind anyone who entered that power lived here, and obedience followed. Eleanor Whitcomb sat at the head of the table, chairwoman, ruler, architect of a multinational empire built on acquisitions, leverage, key, and quiet fear. She had inherited nothing and forgiven no one on her rise. She believed respect was something taken, never offered. Around her sat board members, legacy executives, media observers, and legal counsel. Every seat occupied, every posture. Rehearsed cameras lined the walls, broadcasting the moment live to shareholders across continents. This was meant to be a celebration, a partnership announcement between old power and new influence. A signal to the market that stability and innovation had merged. Then the doors opened and Amina Cole walked in, without spectacle, without entourage, without armor. She was the newest chief executive officer in the room. And the most dangerous, though no one there understood why she had grown up counting coins, watching eviction notices stacking against her mother's prayers. She had slept in cars, built prototypes, in borrowed garages, learned finance from free courses and failure from rejection. She did not conquer by force. She outlasted everyone else. She wore a tailored suit, unbranded, clean, her hair pulled back, her expression calm. She carried no ego into the room because she had already buried it on the way up. Introductions were made. Applause followed, polite, restrained. Amina stepped forward when prompted, extended her hand toward Eleanor. Not submissive, not challenging, simply present the universal gesture that sealed alliances across centuries. And Eleanor smiled, a thin, calculated smile, the kind sharpened by decades of dominance. She leaned back, letting the pause stretch, letting the cameras zoom, letting the air thicken. Then she said clearly, slowly, so every microphone could drink it in, "We do not shake hands with people like you." The laughter followed, immediate, rehearsed obedience. Some laughed too loudly, others too softly. A few stared at the table, but no one spoke. The cameras caught everything: the stillness on Amina's face, the slight lift of Eleanor's chin, the ripple of comfort among those who believed power protected them. Amina did not withdraw her hand in anger. She did not argue. She did not plead. She simply lowered it, as if concluding a private calculation, nodded once, and took her seat. The meeting continued. Slides appeared. Forecasts were discussed. Questions asked. Answers given. But the room was no longer steering its own fate. Something irreversible had occurred. The clip spread before the meeting even ended. Phones vibrated, assistants whispered, social feeds exploded. Outrage, disbelief, justification, denial. The chairwoman's office issued a statement before sunset, citing misunderstanding, tradition, tone, culture, the usual language of retreat, disguised as strength. Analysts debated reputational risk. Investors watched volatility lines twitch, and Eleanor dismissed concerns with a wave. She had survived storms before. She believed this was noise beneath her. Amina left the building alone, declined interviews, ignored messages. She returned to a quiet office, high above a different part of the city, one without marble or cameras. She sat down, removed her watch, placed it carefully on the desk, and made a single call, her voice steady, unemotional: execute the contingency tonight and nothing more. The line disconnected. She stood by the window, watching traffic thread through streets she once walked without purpose. She remembered sleeping upright in a car during winter, waiting for a loan approval that never came. Remembered learning to negotiate by listening. Remembered building leverage silently, brick by brick, because she had learned early that loud power attracts resistance, but quiet power reshapes reality. The city lights flickered on, unaware that before sunrise entire portfolios would bleed. She did not smile. She did not celebrate. She simply waited because consequences move faster when they are already prepared. By midnight, the city still glittered, unaware that foundations were cracking beneath its brightest towers. Eleanor Whitcomb slept soundly, convinced the outrage cycle would burn itself out. By morning, she had seen scandals. Fade apologies accepted. Stocks rebound. This was merely another challenge to be managed by legal teams and carefully chosen words. But elsewhere, systems were moving, mechanisms, long prepared, activated with precision. Mina Cole had not built contingency out of spite. She had built it out of survival years ago when her first company collapsed after a handshake. Deal dissolved overnight. She learned never to depend on goodwill again. Every partnership, every alliance, every investment she touched afterward came layered, with exit clauses, reciprocal dependencies, and quiet switches that could reroute power instantly. Those lessons now moved. Without her needing to touch them, the first tremor hit in Asia. Before dawn, algorithmic trading desks flagged unusual sell orders tied to Whitcomb Holdings. Not panic selling, but deliberate structured withdrawals cascading through subsidiaries and shell funds. Analysts assumed routine rebalancing until correlated positions began collapsing. Logistics, shipping, insurance, data, infrastructure, all linked, all bleeding simultaneously. By the time Europe woke, futures were red. Headlines began to form, whispers. First, then certainty. Major institutional partners were pulling out, citing morality clauses, breach of conduct, reputational risk clauses Eleanor herself had once insisted upon to control others, now turning inward like knives. Her legal team scrambled. Phones rang unanswered. Private jets were prepped, but nowhere safe to land because the exits were closing. Everywhere, Amina watched the numbers climb and fall from a quiet conference room surrounded by people who spoke only when necessary. These were not employees. They were architects, mathematicians, ethicists, strategists, people who believed markets were ecosystems, not casinos. They had built models anticipating arrogance long before it arrived. They had waited for proof, not because revenge demanded it, but because accountability required it. The video replayed endlessly, commentators argued. Intent, tone, history, context. Some defended Eleanor as misunderstood, others called it what it was, and beneath the noise something colder moved. Credit lines froze. Insurers withdrew coverage, suppliers demanded upfront payment, subsidiaries lost liquidity. Dominoes fell without spectacle. No dramatic crash, just erosion, relentless and mathematical. By mid-morning, Whitcomb Holdings lost 17% by noon, 29% by afternoon. Over $40 billion in market value evaporated. Eleanor arrived at headquarters furious, demanding answers, ordering statements, threatening lawsuits, but power was already slipping fingers. No longer obeyed. Doors that once opened now stalled. Assistants avoided eye contact. Phones rang and rang. She demanded to speak to Amina, personally, convinced this could be handled privately, woman to woman, dealmaker to dealmaker. But the call never connected because silence was the answer, not vengeance. The board convened. Emergency session. Cameras excluded this time. Voices raised blame. Scattered, but one truth dominated: confidence was gone. And without confidence, empires dissolve. Eleanor attempted control, invoked loyalty, legacy, fear. None of it worked. Fear requires belief in protection, and that belief was dead. Meanwhile, Amina finally spoke publicly, once a single statement delivered without heat, without accusation. She said, respect is not a gesture, it is a condition of partnership. When that condition fails, alignment ends. She offered no commentary, no demand, no insult, and the restraint unsettled markets more than rage ever could, because it revealed preparation, not reaction. By evening, Whitcomb Holdings shares had fallen so far, trading was halted. Regulators announced investigations not into Tani, the comment, but into governance failures, exposure, concentration, ethics, oversight, the structure Eleanor built to dominate others, now exposed her vulnerabilities. Journalists uncovered patterns, past settlements, silenced executives, cultures of exclusion. All dismissed before, now resurfacing with context and consequence. The phrase handshake collapse trended globally, not coined by Amina, not claimed by anyone. It emerged organically because the image was simple, undeniable. A hand extended, a hand refused. And everything after felt inevitable. Eleanor sat alone late that night, lights off, staring at screens, unable to comprehend how quickly gravity had returned. She had believed power was permanence. She had believed silence from others meant consent. She had never imagined silence could also be strategy. She replayed the moment, searching for justification for escape. For some lever still available, but all leverage had already been priced in. Elsewhere, contracts rewritten, partnerships reassigned. Leadership questioned at every level. She realized too late that Amina had never come seeking approval. She had come offering alignment. And when that offer was rejected, the consequences were not emotional, they were structural. Outside the building, protesters gathered signs, raised voices loud but irrelevant compared to what was happening quietly in data centers and boardrooms. Worldwide, the world had seen something it could not unsee. A reminder that modern power is conditional, portable, responsive, and ruthless when dignity is breached. Amina returned home late that night, not to celebrate, but to rest. She knew this was not the end, only the midpoint. Accountability rarely ends cleanly. It ripples, and she was prepared to walk through those ripples, calmly, because she had learned long ago that the loudest storms are not the most destructive. The quiet ones reshape landscapes forever. Morning arrived without mercy for those who had believed power was immune to consequence. Headlines covered every screen, not with rage but with numbers, charts, timelines. Analysts calling it unprecedented, a coordinated ethical withdrawal, a structural market correction born from a single moment of public clarity. Universities scheduled case studies before the week ended. Regulators met across regions, announced parallel reviews, investors demanded board resignations, and before noon, Eleanor Whitcomb was removed as chairwoman, not by protest, not by scandal alone, but by vote. Cold procedural final. The empire she built did not burn. It was dismantled component by component, sold, divided, absorbed by firms that understood adaptation better than dominance. Eleanor issued a statement of regret, carefully worded, legally reviewed, emotionally hollow. The market ignored it because apologies without leverage are merely noise. She vanished from public view within days, her name reduced to footnotes and cautionary slides, while the phrase handshake collapse became shorthand in corporate culture training sessions, ethics seminars, leadership summits. It was no longer about race alone, though race could not be separated from it. It became about exposure, about how quickly unchecked arrogance reveals fragility when observed under light. Amina Cole did not assume a throne. She declined interviews, rejected book deals, delayed celebrations. She understood that attention is another form of debt, and she had no intention of owing anyone. Her focus turned inward, to her own company, to stabilizing partnerships, reassuring teams, emphasizing values, not as slogans, but as operational rules. She reminded leadership that dignity is infrastructure. When it fails, everything downstream collapses quietly. Contracts were rewritten globally. Morality clauses strengthened governance. Diversified decision power, redistributed not as punishment, but prevention. Competitors took notes. Allies adjusted behavior without being asked. The market had learned without being lectured. Months later, at a global economic forum, a moderator asked Amina. She considered what happened revenge. She paused, not for effect, but for accuracy, then said, "No revenge requires anger. This required preparation." She explained that systems respond to alignment, not emotion, that silence is not weakness when paired with structure, that respect is not symbolic, it is functional without it. Trust erodes, and trust is liquidity. The room was silent, executives uncomfortable yet attentive because they recognized the truth. She was naming something many had felt but never articulated, that power today is not held, it is granted moment by moment by those willing to engage. Eleanor watched. The clip from a quiet estate far from boardrooms. Lawyers settled remaining disputes, assets reallocated her legacy reframed. She realized too late that she had mistaken fear for loyalty and silence for ignorance. The cost was not just financial. It was historical. She would be remembered not for decades of control, but for one. Refusal captured forever. Meanwhile, Amina continued building, quietly expanding, responsibly mentoring founders, funding inclusion not as charity but as strategy, because resilience grows where diversity exists. She never referenced Eleanor again because the lesson no longer required a villain, it had become institutionalized. A new baseline expectation whispered through halls that once rewarded cruelty disguised as strength. The calmest act of destruction ever caught on camera had already done its work, not through spectacle but through inevitability, and the sentence that changed an industry was not the insult, it was the silence that followed the choice to walk away, because in business and in life, real power does not shout, it chooses where to stand and when to leave, and the world adjusted accordingly.